So welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. Today is Thursday, April the 9th, 2026. Welcome, Susan. Welcome, Michael. Little group so far. Of course, yesterday it was about 10 after before people kept popping in, so hopefully they'll all come in. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, Miss Susan?
Very well. How about you, Jeannie?
Good. We've got both kids today. They're on spring break, so Arya's here all day, and we have them all day tomorrow. So,
Whoa.
yeah, busy.
And Lincoln's just right on the edge of sleep, laying there beside me.
Uh,
So,
So how are you, young lady? Did
I'm
all that
very
regulatory speech conversation make sense for you yesterday? Did that come together?
it's just word substitution for me. If I can find a word that somehow sits more easily, um, I didn't quite get comfortable with it, I have to admit, and I was grateful to have company and Terry, who was rankling around with the same thing. I mean, you're the genius behind the tools and the words. Some of them fit right in, and some of them are take an adjustment before I can fit them in. Another word you use that's similar is responsibility communication. And I usually change that to responsible communication. If I'm responsible, conscious, in other words, conscious of how I'm speaking and what I'm saying beneath what I think I'm saying. See what I mean? I do these little adjustments.
Well, with that one,
Huh?
with that adjustment you just explained, here's my offering.
Okay.
You just took away the whole idea of the responsibility communication. And the essence of responsibility communication, I would offer, is not that I'm conscious of what I'm saying, et cetera, but it's that I'm using words that reflect my awareness that what I'm describing is a construct in my mind.
I understand.
That's
Yep.
the responsibility aspect of it. As
Okay.
opposed
I get it.
to as opposed to the way most people use words, and they use words for projection communication. And in that context, projection communication is I use words to describe the fact that you're the cause of what's happening in my mind. I have nothing to do with it. So the idea of responsibility here is I'm bringing the responsibility back home. I am being aware, not just aware of my words, but aware that the words and consciously, purposely using words that reflect my awareness that this is mine and is about me.
I understand. Yep.
Cool. And Miss Sally's here. And Miss Cammie, how are you ladies?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Anything exciting happening?
Nope, just sitting out in the sun and looking at the water and listening to you.
How
I mean,
long you
that's pretty exciting, but
how long are you guys going to be down there?
I don't know. Like at least another month, but the guy that owns the place just asked me if I wanted a job for a couple months, so I'm not sure.
Ah,
Um what that's about. He asked last night and I just now got the message, so
no, cool.
I'm interested to see what that is.
Yeah, hey, to get paid to
Yeah.
be there instead of paying to be there, that's pretty cool.
Right. So yeah, we'll see. I got
Awesome.
a I got an idea of what he's um but I don't know for sure. So I'll just wait and see.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, hold the space that it's absolutely right for you, whichever direction you go with it.
It will be.
Yeah.
No doubt, because I'm not in charge.
Surrender, sweet surrender.
Sweet surrender, yes. So, yeah, I don't really have anything.
Cool. Well, anyone else anything to share? Okay, well, we've circled around this idea of regulatory speech a couple of times, and Susan and I were just discussing refinements of it, and I'm still not clear, Susan, what where the line is, where the dividing line is that isn't fitting in. I would love to hear more and see if I can maybe understand more.
I think what you did is do a word link. Responsibility communication. If I translate it, it would mean I am taking full responsibility for how I communicate, because everything I am only perceiving, I don't know actuality. So communication responsibly, or that's one thing, but taking responsibility for my perception and then using words that are aligned with that. That's what you're saying. Those two words are both big words and they're put together. That's all. It's like a two cars and a train. And if I understand it better now that you explained it, and so I think you did a good job. Responsibility communication. I'm thinking more like a linguist or something. You, in order to make sense, to me, it would say, I'm taking responsibility for how I communicate, because everything I experience is my experience and it's my perception. Does that make sense? So.
There's still, in my best understanding, there's still another piece beyond what you just said.
Okay, I'm listening.
I'm not taking responsibility for my perception, but I'm in a world where projection communication is the norm. Actually, in a world where communication rarely happens. You know, if we define the purpose of words, is that of, and this is the best definition I've found yet, is that communication is utilizing words to transfer intact a construct in my mind into your mind. So that's my idea. Most people don't use words for that purpose at all. They use words for winning, getting what they want, overcoming, abusing, putting themselves or others down. They use words for all kinds of purposes other than that. And then when we take it to, for me, when we take it to responsibility communication, it's more than just taking responsibility for the words I use. It's consciously, purposely using words that reflect the awareness that the construct in my mind, the reality that I'm holding, is a unique perspective for me that belongs to me. And I'm going to use words that reflect that I'm aware that it belongs to me. It doesn't belong to the world. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong outside of me. It is something that's going on inside of me. And I'm going to use words to reflect that I'm clear that this is owned and belongs to, and is a construct that I've made up And the purpose of that, or to me, the benefit of that is, as long as I'm using words for any lesser purpose, even if it's only 1 or 2 degrees, to that degree, I'm in denial. And when I live in denial, which again I would define as thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I now have to enter into a lie in my mind. In essence, when I'm using words that are projection communication, as so much of the culture does, in effect, I'm giving my mind an instruction. And the instruction when I use projection communication is, mind, there's something inside of me that belongs to me, and I want nothing whatsoever to do with it. I don't want to see it, taste it, smell it, or even imagine that it's mine. You need to hide this in the deepest parts of me where I can't find it. And now we've created an unconscious mind. And now we're living out of a lie. And the way I free myself from the lie is by making sure that every word that I use reflects my awareness and of course offers the awareness to others that what I'm describing is something that is uniquely mine, made up by me, constructed by me, a perception that I own.
That's a lot of explanation for 2 words, so I appreciate it. I'm thinking back to Jeannie's book. She had a glossary, and Jeannie, do you remember whether, because I shudder to think what we might have done with responsibility communication if that was in the glossary, unless Michael looked it over and corrected it.
I actually don't think that was included
Oh,
because I used the glossary was words used in the worksheet.
mm-hmm.
I'm looking real quick here.
Well, I'm almost relieved that you didn't, because Mike, you and I were flying by the seat of our pants on that one, because I didn't have the understanding that I now do, having heard Michael say all that he just said.
No, it's not in the glossary.
That's a good thing, Jeannie. All right. Okay, thanks.
Well, let's take from the book, seeing as how where this whole conversation started and we've come back around to it, let's take a couple more examples of this idea of projection communication and going the step further into looking at regulatory speech. You know, it all ties together. So I'm going to paste another statement that Jeannie had isolated out as an example of regulatory speech, becoming conscious of the impact of my speech. So I just pasted it in the chat. This state allows appropriate response to life without becoming trapped in chronic survival or withdrawal. So that would be an example where we'd say, well, you might want to look at your regulatory speech there. You know, if you look at the first few words of the sentence, it's right on track. This state allows appropriate response to life. Here I am, and for me, what that would communicate is an appropriate response to life is I am a being that is a creator, and as an abundant, awake, aware, eternal, conscious creator, I respond to life appropriately. But this would be where, you know, if Shakespeare were sitting with us and he heard the whole sentence, this state allows appropriate response to life without becoming trapped in chronic survival or withdrawal. Shakespeare would just put his hand up and say, hold on. That would probably be a place, and of course this is my projection on Shakespeare, that would probably be a place where it might be useful to go. So here I am, I'm getting focused on appropriate. I realize who I am. I've awakened to who I am, and I'm going to respond appropriate to life as this conscious, creative being called love. And then my mind comes in with its unconscious dynamics. And in remember we talk about file folders. So let's imagine now we're looking at the speech that's in a folder about appropriate responses. And if that folder were clean and clear, the only thing that would come out of the mouth based on what's in that folder would be, I'm a conscious creator, I'm abundant, I'm creative, I set my life up, and things just rock along. But then if there are these words, if my mind through resonance, now that with my speech, I've opened the idea of appropriate response, I'm in a state of being that allows appropriate responses for who I am. So I've opened up my file now on appropriate responses. And what is my mind telling me? Oh, we got some stuff in here about being trapped in survival and withdrawal. So the usefulness of understanding regulatory speech there would be, the average person would take that statement and say, well, that's perfect. That's beautiful. Isn't that great? And if you recognize that many of the prompts for the activity of speech, which is a behavior, and this ties into all behavior prompts, that tied into that follow-on or appropriate response is being trapped. So I'd be saying to the person who says that, so I'd do some worksheets on feeling trapped. And I'd do some worksheets around being in chronic survival. And I'd do some worksheets around withdrawing. Because the speech in that sentence tells me that in the file in my mind on appropriate responses, those other things are lurking beneath the surface. And I want to become cognizant of them so that I can clean them up, so that I don't have to create out of those resonating energies. Is that taking regulatory speech to a level where it makes sense? Questions, thoughts? What I'm looking to do without, the whole course on laws of living where we layer in and build up to this is get this whole idea of regulatory speech across. So I would love to hear somebody's voice saying, yeah, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense, or what use is it, or why would I want to do that, or what the hell are you even talking about? Whatever. If there are any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. No thoughts. Okay.
Lots of thoughts.
Well, then put your hand out, hit your mute button and say it. Let's get the conversation rocking here. Let's get the deepest refinements we can get. Refinements are going to come a lot more deeply and a lot more truly if it comes out of interaction rather than, I have this piece of information I'm going to present. What I'm looking to do, or at least my vision for the conversation is to transfer the deepest understanding, the most utilitarian understanding of why we even have this thing called, that we speak of as regulatory speech.
One reason I'm stumbling along is because I don't think I could do any better than you did, but it took a lot of talking to explain that, and that might be the way it is. If we are concerned for our survival, or there's some you're saying something outside of me is causing my feeling, I understand that, and that's what you're talking about. What?
In terms of regulatory speech?
Yes.
No, that's not the objective here. For me, in this statement, I'm not implying that there's any even tinge of blaming something or somebody out there. The idea here of understanding regulatory speech in this this construct is to recognize what's going on in my own mind by paying attention to my own speech. And what my mind is telling me is that in the file in my mind on appropriate responses, I have ideas of being trapped, being in chronic survival, and withdrawing. And as a being of light and of love, my offering would be that withdrawing, being trapped, or being in survival are out of harmony with the truth of my creative process. But if that speech is in there and it automatically comes out of my mouth, then there are energetic patterns out of which I am going to create. It's got nothing to do with anybody else, nothing to do with responsibility communication here. This is just how I use my own speech to look at what's going on in my mind. Like no one ever says a word out of anything other than brain cells that are firing. So let's use an example. We're going to be driving out to Heartland in June. So if I were on the show and saying we're going to be driving out to Heartland in June, and I threw into the conversation, well, we're driving out to Heartland in June, and we're not going to go to Florida. Well, whence comes we're not going to go to Florida? It can only come from something firing in brain cells about Florida. If I'm driving to Missouri, I'm driving to Missouri. I wouldn't say I'm not driving to China, I'm not driving to Italy, I'm not driving to France, I'm not driving to Buffalo, New York, and I'm not driving to Miami unless there was something firing in brain cells about Florida, Miami, Buffalo, New York, etc. So the idea here is when I pay attention to my speech, I can get clues about issues that if I face them at their first peaking up of the head, i.e. in my speech, I'm going to be able to move through them and remove them from my creative process without having to wait until I unconsciously, as a creator, having issues about being trapped, create myself in a trap and go, oh, now I'm going to deal with my trap stuff. So it's like the speech is an early manifestation. A lot further down the road is the experience of finding myself trapped, creating a situation where I'm trapped. And of course, I can wait until I'm trapped, and then I'll have to work my way through it and out of it. It's manifestation, all of that. But if I paid attention to it, 10 years ago, when I first started talking about appropriate responses and feeling trapped, and I cleaned it up then, 10 years later, I wouldn't have set myself up in a trap because I cleaned that part of my mind up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess I was thinking that if the person feels trapped, they are remembering or resonating sometime when they blamed something outside themselves for producing that feeling. Because if they have that feeling, there was a projection at one point. I'm not sure we're even talking about the same thing, Michael. I'm sorry, it's so thorny. I don't know why it is.
This is how we get clarification. This is right on track. This is the kind of conversation that helps people to build brain cells and understanding. So please let go of the apologizing for it. We're right on track.
Oh, good.
And so once I've paid attention to my regulatory speech, trapped, then you're right. I probably at some point, here I was, it might be, there was a problem in the womb when I was being delivered, and they couldn't get me out in time, and I almost suffocated.
Yeah.
That might be what I might need to deal with. Or it might be when I was 3 years of age and my older brother, took me and forced me into a closet and, put a stick in front of the door. And I was trapped in there for 8 hours. And I'm enraged with my brother. That might be what I need to deal with. But the objective of regulatory speech is to just inform me there's something in here that I want to look at and I want to deal with. The next issue is, is it something, that I've projected? Then, what, like a mind shifter, once I use regulatory speech to recognize I've got an issue, then I'm going to look down the list of the tools that I have. And what am I going to do about it? If this trap thing's about my brother, I might decide to dig out my responsibility communication instructions and do a whole written dialogue or interaction, a letter to my brother about what happened and why did, and whatever I need to resolve. I still have rage about this. I still have terror about this. And brother, I would love your support in healing it. So whatever appropriate tool is to use it. The objective of the regulatory speech is just when I pay attention to my words fly up, but my thoughts, that is my creative process, remains below. I use this as an information gathering system to look at my creative process. Resolution, what tool you're going to use is another whole issue.
Mm.
Does that resonate anything for anybody else?
So, Michael,
Yes.
say the baby, you talked about a baby in the womb who had a hard time. That baby's experience was not a projection.
Yeah,
That
nobody's
baby,
saying it is.
no, that was a question, I guess. Um, I'm asking you, I guess, the baby's knowledge or remembrance of that could be construed as I feel lousy now because that happened to me, i.e., there's blame there or an explanation, and there's a blurring between blaming something on the outside caused by somebody's maybe bad behavior and a circumstance that was actually an actuality.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happened to this baby.
Yes,
But the
actuality.
baby, right, but the baby as an older person wonders why he or she is triggered by something and feels unsafe, maybe fearing suffocation or something,
Right,
and
exactly.
goes back to that's still not a blaming thing. Whereas I might have said, well, the interpretation the baby has now, the child is now putting on that experience amounts to a projection and a judgment and a
Yes,
blaming.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let me see if I can feed back where I think you're going and my input around it. So the fact is sometimes there are problems in birth and sometimes babies actually die of suffocation because they can't get them out fast enough. In this case, we have a child that definitely experienced some very severe physiological, mental, emotional, and relational trauma, because you can bet the doctor was in terror, and if mom was awake, she was probably in terror over
Right.
what's going on, and maybe feelings of loss, and the doctor feelings, of terror about losing his livelihood because maybe he's going to get sued. All of those energetic patterns are an actuality for that child in the utero.
Yeah.
And now, 30 years later, in a situation where that's resonated into activity, one might turn to their partner and say, why are you just standing there and blaming all of your fear on me? And now we're into the realm of reality. And so the young man at 30 or the young woman at 30 who's in a relationship issue where this whole thing is now moving physiologically, like they're ready to process through it and be done with this literal physiological energy of being trapped. If they use projection communication, why are you doing all this terror stuff and making this all my fault? That would be projection communication, as opposed to someone who's aware of might just stop and recognizing that there's some real physiological trauma going on, being resonated by what their partner's saying and doing, stops, takes a breath, and realizes there's resistance in them, that their temple is closing down, that they're shutting down around this pain, holding on, not wanting to deal with it. And that would be the place where one would, with having the tools, would stop, take a breath, step into willingness, and maybe just take a time out and say, gee, I've got a lot of, and I don't know what it's about right now, but I've got a lot of physical trauma. I mean, I'm feeling like my chest is being crushed, my guts, my pelvis is locking up. Like, I don't know what's going on, sweetheart, but I got something going on here, and I need to take a minute and just breathe. And that might be the place to breathe deeply, identify the emotions, the feelings that are going on, and allow with willingness the breath to move at depth. And at depth would be the point where this person in that situation all of a sudden has the memory of, and I've seen this happen dozens and dozens of times over the years, all of a sudden this person has this memory of, I thought this was about what you were doing in this argument we're having, and what I just realized is I just had this memory of coming up. And I remember hearing stories about it, but this is the first time I've really gotten in direct touch with. I was trapped in my birth and couldn't get out. And my mom told me how afraid she was and how terrified she was going to lose this dear child that she was looking forward to having. And, I don't know what this fear is about. It's just like beyond my comprehension, but I'm going to stop and I'm going to breathe. Would you do some energy field work on me and hold the space? And all of a sudden, physiologically, Satan is defeated. Remember Satan in Aramaic being the resistor, one who misleads. So the resistance in physiology, not wanting to feel and deal with this literal physiological trauma that's been carried in the body for decades, and the emotional trauma that was going on around that was registered in the child while they were in utero, while the doctors were working to get that child out. That's where that memory comes up, and all of a sudden, it's like, geez, this didn't even have anything to do with you, sweetheart. Yeah, we had this conflict going on, but I'm realizing now, geez, I just have this memory that it's right here in my face. I actually remember physically how it felt to be so confined in my mother's womb, and I couldn't move, and the cord was trapped, was collapsed at that point. I realized I had no breath. I was terrified. And the people, wow, I can, they've done hypnosis with people and, adults, and taken them back to the moment of their birth. And that the person, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of age that's being put in hypnosis goes back to the moment of their birth. They can tell you what the doctor's emotional state was. They can tell you what mother's hairdo was. That's all registered in them. The difference between projection communication and responsibility communication is, I've got all this pain and trauma and trapped in me, and look what you're doing to me, and you just need to back off and get away from me and just shut up because I can't take this anymore. That's projection communication. Responsibility communication in this case is, I'm breathing into this and I'm just realizing I have this physical memory of almost dying and being so terrified and in such pain because I couldn't breathe. And what I really want here, part of responsibility communication is what I really want is just support for, would you hold the space for me to just be in what I'm in here and breathe with me as I move through this? And, I have this tightness right here in my spine. Oh man, I can almost remember it was like I was twisted in the birth canal. Would you just put your elbow right there and give that a push and help me to open that? That's responsibility communication.
Michael, you've just done it when you juxtaposed responsibility communication versus, or as compared to, projection communication. It just comes clear for me. I hope You know, that just did it. When you put those two, compared them as the opposites that they are, projection, communication, and it's sort of like owning or actuality, my actuality communication. I'm not saying you should change the word, but when you put them together, both of them come into focus.
Good. That we've achieved what we wanted to. Cool.
It is cool
You,
because there's no fight or blame. The main person there, the subject, is not blaming anybody, even though they might have had half of a fight going
yeah, if you've
before.
got two people
Yeah,
and they're there in their matching bags of garbage, person one will always have the match. The person who's got the terror will tend to hook up to the person who's got the rage so that they can pretend they're in terror because of the rage. And
yeah,
the person who's in rage can pretend they're in rage because of this person's terror. If you just
yeah.
stop doing that weak, sucky terror thing, I wouldn't have to be enraged with you.
Mm-hmm.
Projection communication. Each one of them has got a reality going on. And if we can drop the conversation about what's going on inside of me has got something to do with you, other than perhaps you've triggered it for me, it's got nothing to do with you. It's what's going on inside of me. And when I can go in and own that, language it responsibly, then the chances are, with our matching bags of garbage, that when I'm able to actually transfer the reality in my mind using words intact into your mind, you're probably going to drop all that rage stuff and you're probably going to step into compassion and be there to hold the space to support me through getting loose on this, getting this literal energy that has been physiologically stuck for decades in the body and the emotions that go with it. Then what happens when people move out of projection communication into responsibility communication? And, over the years, when we do an intensive and we do an actual demonstration of it, it's always one of the most powerful tools for people coming out of their projections and owning it. And the shifts that take place energetically are magnificent.
Well, that's a demonstration of forgiveness right there.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And the whole objective of virtually every one of the tools is to get to that point of forgiveness, that the
Mm-hmm.
energy that's locked in my tissue structure is freed from my tissue structure.
Fantastic.
One of the big backward turnarounds it has happened in, going from the Aramaic to the Greek, is that many people who bought into the Greek translations and ideas of Yeshua's work, they want to be forgiven for their sins. Oh, let me off the hook for my sins, God, I was terrible. When the Aramaic comes through, we're back to, oh, I need to have this energy released from me. God, would you support me letting go of this?
Yeah.
Not forgive me for my sin, but literally forgive me of my sin, the energy that's off the mark that I'm holding on to. Remove it from my physiology. And that's where they said only God can forgive, because you and I don't know how to even move a muscle. Truly,
Yeah.
we can direct the moving of it, but we don't know how to do it. There's something in us that does. Yeshua called that something the Father and referred to it also as the Creator. Only the Creator can move that energy. But I'm the one who's got the choice over whether or not it moves because of free will. And then, of course, if you put that elbow in my back and help me to open that up, and I'm all of a sudden this whole load that I've been carrying for decades, I'm freed from. I'm probably going to turn around in one of the deepest spaces of compassion possible to your issue that was the matching bag of garbage with mine, and say, okay, so now I can see how I've triggered that rage in you. And when you see hopeless and helpless, what's really going on for you? And the person in rage is probably going to go back to the point where they were in the trap, or their perception was trapped. And now the space is going to be safe enough for each. The reason why, the reason why people hide from themselves or hide from others what's going on inside of them is because there is no safe space to let this actually come out. And to me, one of the objectives of everything that we're doing is to make the space safe enough for whatever I am in resistance to open and be embraced. And part of that means giving up the conversation about everybody else and owning, when there's pain or trauma going inside of me, I need to step into responsibility communication. I'm the only one I need to talk about. If I start talking about you, all of a sudden, I'm now back in my denial dissociation game.
I can see how this is going to affect the writing of your book, because what you're doing with the Greek thought structure and the Aramaic is, there's no battle here. You're actually opening the way to uncover the trauma that led to the Greek way of thinking and releasing so many Greek thinking sorts of people, many in particularly the Roman Catholic Church, who feel like sinners and feel as if they've got to get to confession really fast. And it's also, once they're absolved in that artificial way, they feel as if they can go on and commit more sins because they're going to be let off the hook. The whole mechanism isn't right, but somehow to have it be like that sort of defanging of blame toward the Greeks. Boy, what an assignment you've given yourself, Michael.
Well, my take is that, when you go back to the Aramaic language, the Aramaic experience was based in a connectedness and a closeness with the breath and physiology and relational.
Mm-hmm.
And the Greeks came in, and you look at how they tried to Hellenize, and it's interesting that they used the word Hellenize because that's exactly what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
That the Greeks had this well-developed, hey, we cut off from that crap long ago. We are in our minds. We have our intellects. We are the peak of the therapist world. We are John the Baptist, and man, watch how we can put all this intellectual stuff together. But by God, don't make me touch that pain in my big toe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's where Yeshua, and that wasn't just happening with the Greeks. You look at Yeshua talking to the rabbis of the day, and he says to them, you put a burden on people, a burden that you won't even touch with one finger. And that's exactly the same thing. It's like you've separated yourself from the fact of what's happening in your own physiology. And Yeshua is trying to bring them back to it, and the burden, the load, generations and generations of that they've been separated from. It's like, no, I don't even want to go close to that. And if you go to the original idea of confession is a really important part of the healing process. You look at the AA programs, and confession is right at the core of it. I shared what I did with one other person. I opened the space to step into honesty. And, if you go back to the whole idea of priesthood or ministers or nuns, whatever, theoretically, these were people who had done their own work so that if somebody came to them with an issue, they were a clear space of love to support the healing. It was just about someone who had the capability. It's not that this person has any magical, I have a magical power to forgive you, but it was that having done one's own deeper work, they were able to be the space for whatever was brought to them. So when one was ready to open up and go, okay, I got a big one here to deal with, there was a safe space to deal with it, and someone who could simply hold the space of blessing and love for the healing rather than getting lost in it themselves. So to me, the whole idea is to bring around, what they turned in when Yeshua says it's all Greek to me, what they turned into this Greek. I distance myself from what's going on in my own physiology. I don't put one finger on that burden. I don't look there. I don't go there. I don't breathe there. I have that cut off. That's Satan's domain.
Mm.
To me, the objective is to invite people out of that and go, yeah, you need to go there. You need to be able to take a breath. And, if you were trapped in the womb and almost suffocated and were lost in terror, if you've got a life that you're unconscious as a foundation in that kind of terror, then you're living in hell. You've been Hellenized.
Mm.
And the objective is to bring the tools around to the point where people go, oh, whatever it is that I'm carrying, there is a presence of love here powerful enough to support me in allowing whatever it is to open. And responsibility communication is just a way that we invite each other to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that space. Because the minute that I stop talking about how you're responsible for what's happening inside of me, it opens a space for you to step into being, and vice versa. And when each time we take a step closer to being, there's another whole layer of crap that gets cleared out. Oh, next layer into being, another whole layer gets cleared out until there's just being left.
Yeah.
And that's what Yeshua said he was here to do, was to bring life, and I would substitute the word being there and bring it more abundantly. To truly bring each person to that space where they realize and make real in their own physiology their true created human essence, love, delivered into every cell through the breath. And if there's anything in the generations, anything in the genes that's unlike that presence of love, that breath goes so deeply that it accesses. And again, the definition of Ruka Dakucha, the breath, she who undoes the effects of our errors. So it's safe to let it be exposed. We don't have to figure it out. We have to throw it out.
Mm.
So that's what we'd be here to do. Thank you for helping me to get there.
You've got a huge, man, the responsibility you have and the delicacy with which you're going to have to do this is just a real assignment. To have it
My
be.
take is
But
the opportunity that I have is monumental.
yeah.
And the opportunity and having an inkling of what needs to be done, which is really the core of this conversation, to me is what inspires me to keep moving into my own process so that I can step to the next level of being able to make it sensible and available rather than some sort of mystical, magical, somebody's going to wave their hands over you and then you're going to be blessed and it'll all be fixed. One of the things I'm writing about in the book is, they call Yeshua the master physician, but then they go on and play around with him as though he's some sort of miracle worker. No, the man is a master physician. He knows how healing happens. He knows how this energy field works. And he explains it to people. And they say too hard a saying, I don't want to go there. I'm out of here. But he's a physician. He is an actual physician. This isn't about miracles. Now, from the point of view of the Greek mind, wow, this is so miraculous. We just talk about miracles. But the fact is, in physiology, the man was a physician who knew exactly how to deliver and how to open what needed to be open for true healing to happen on every level. And that's what I'm looking or working to restore with this book.
I can see why you say you've got to go layer deeper and deeper in yourself to be able to do that. That's huge. Anybody who has anything of an alloy of the projecting mind has to somehow heal of that or at least deeply understand it so that you don't perpetuate the thought disorder on some level you can't even tell that it is at this point.
That's why paying attention to your speech is so important, because you'll inform yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so important. And to recognize that no translator can translate what they haven't experienced, but they don't have the brain cells for.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. All the way back to Isaiah, which you talk about. For their minds were waxed gross, for seeing they could not perceive, and hearing they could not understand.
Mm-hmm.
The epitome of a mind waxed gross is the Greek translator, the Greek misinterpretations of Yeshua's words. Getting it back to the actuality of what he spoke is the process. And, you know, I mean, it doesn't matter. There's actually a parable that I put in the book. I don't remember if I've talked about this on the show or not, but I use the parable of, so let's imagine that we have an x-ray machine sitting there in the office, and we take a 5-year-old child into the x-ray room. And the 5-year-old child looks and goes, oh, wire, metal box, glass, what can be done? Nothing. There's just some wires and metal and glass, and so what? That's the level of brain cells the child has. Let's take a really highly skilled craftsman, somebody who knows how to build the most beautiful houses in the world, very, very highly talented, and we walk him in the room. Do we get any better result from the x-ray machine from that person? No. Metal, wire, glass, so what? We get, the most learned PhD in the top universities in the world in whatever field, that you want. Save medicine and put them in a room. What do you get out of the box? Nothing. You take the doctor, i.e., the person who's got the brain cells, and now you have a diagnostic device that can help save people's lives. But you don't get that to function as a diagnostic device until you got somebody with the eyes to see and the ears to hear how to use it, how to make it function. And to me, that's what getting back to the Aramaic is about, is helping each person to develop the brain cells to go, oh, I know what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at a worksheet. Oh, this is about denial, dissociation, projection, how to break it down. Goals drive perception. Perception is false. Collapse it, drop into it, throw it. Oh, yeah, I can make this machine work. And to me, the only people on the planet that need that are the 7.5 or so billion that are here now. Not everybody needs an x-ray machine, but I don't know anybody that doesn't need forgiveness. And I mean, not the 5-year-old's level of forgiveness that goes in and looks at the x-ray machine and goes, oh, wires, glass, metal. I'm talking about the deepest refined understanding of how to use that tool to free oneself of what never belonged in anybody's bloodline. So thank you for assisting in developing the conversation. We need hard questions. And I did put Oh, actually, I was ready to put it in, but I actually didn't do it. But I'll go ahead and paste it. And I'll just ask everybody maybe to make a note of this. And let's bring it into the conversation in tomorrow's show. So another piece that Ginny had isolated out of her writing was, want to give myself permission to remember without fear and hate. And so we'll just invite you, we're down to the last minute, to take that and contemplate that as regulatory speech. And how would you explain it? Maybe everybody step up to the plate tomorrow and let's have a conversation about that particular sentence. And in terms of regulatory speech, what could it inform us of? So hope this serves everybody. Delighted that you're here. Thank you for joining us.